The remarkable Republican reversal on the Epstein files bill is now complete. President Donald Trump signed the law yesterday, compelling his government to release all files on sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. But today, Republicans are still facing questions on whether the Attorney General will comply, especially after Trump pushed her to start investigations into figures like former Democrat President Bill Clinton.
I expect him to fully comply. I haven't seen her comments, but if she said we'll follow the law, then good. That's what we want. And I'd expect her to. I've known Pam Bondi a long time. I'd expect her to follow the law completely, and they need to do so swiftly. The statute calls for, I think it's 30 days. It's not long.
They could say, though, that this investigation's underway and they can't give out information because they're investigating Democrats. Does that concern you that they may do that?
No, I don't think they'll do that. I think that would be a mistake to do that, and I don't think they will.
Jonathan Chait is a staff writer at The Atlantic who covers American politics. Jonathan Chait, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So the president has fought against the release of the Epstein files. He called them a Democratic hoax right up until he agreed to release them. Why do you think he changed his course on this?
Well, he was going to lose the vote in Congress over a resolution calling on the files to be released. So he wanted to avoid the appearance of powerlessness, or by whatever pretext he could reach for. So he turned around and said he was in favor of this resolution. But it's a very strange situation that I don't think people completely appreciate. This is a resolution calling on him to release the Epstein files, one in which I think he probably has a great deal of power to ignore. So he's saying he's in favor of this resolution. But reporters keep asking him, well, if you're in favor of the resolution calling on you to release the Epstein files, why don't you just release the Epstein files? And he's responded to these questions by simply abusing the reporters who asked them.
Right. Yeah, like there was the be quiet piggy line on Air Force One.
Right.
The beratement of
right.
the ABC White House correspondent with the threat to strip ABC of its broadcast license. He says he's not afraid of it and it's not a big deal, but then he's obviously incredibly sensitive to the questions.
Yeah, his allies admit that he's acting like someone who has something to hide, but they simply insist that he must not have something to hide, and he's acting this way and making himself look guilty for no reason whatsoever. I don't think that's the most persuasive explanation of his behavior, but of course I can't prove that.
Well, we got another explanation for that today from Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. She was asked about the piggy comment, and she said the president is very frank and honest, and it's one of the reasons he was reelected. I mean, what do you make of that one?
I don't think people voted for him mainly because of his tendency to berate reporters, and especially female ones, over their appearance. I think they probably voted for him despite those qualities.
So here we are. We have House and Senate Republicans. They seem eager to release the files. All but one congressman voted for the bill. So how difficult of a position is Trump put in with this? Because Congress has done everything he's wanted, seemingly, to this point, and they wouldn't do it on this particular one.
Yeah, well, the margins are incredibly narrow in the House of Representatives, so it only takes a handful of Republicans to defect for the party to lose the vote. But this happened over a period of months, and this was an issue in which many hardcore right-wing Republicans were very, very exercised, and that's really what makes this defection so unusual. Typically, a president of any party, when they have defectors in their party, they lose the most moderate members to join with the other side. Here, it's some of the most right-wing Republicans who have joined, because the most right-wing Republicans are the ones who have cared the most about the Epstein files. They were saying for years that this was a massive global conspiracy, which helped explain many of the things that had happened in world affairs. Donald Trump promised to get these files released, and then all of a sudden he just turned around and said, "There's nothing in the files. We don't care about it. It's a boring issue anyway. Everything in the files was made up by Comey and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, and it's a massive conspiracy against me, but it's also completely boring and no one should care about it, and we're done talking about it." And they weren't ready to accept this wild explanation, and they said, "We want to actually see the file."
Well, he's stuck in this weird situation in that, you know, the people with conspiratorial minds when confronted with evidence that the conspiracy isn't real, they don't necessarily change their beliefs, they just expand the conspiracy, right? So when Donald Trump is suddenly saying there's nothing to see here, he's at risk of being accused of being part of the deep state cover-up of all of this by a very large part of his base.
Right. And to be clear, I don't think the evidence for the conspiratorial accounts of Epstein are persuasive or strong in any way. But it is true that he had a lot of powerful friends, and it is true that he was a horrible man who abused a lot of people. And it's also true that he was close friends with Donald Trump for a while. And it's also true that there's significant evidence that Donald Trump was at least somewhat aware of his crimes for a period of time. We don't know how aware he was, and we don't know how implicated he was, if at all, in these activities. But that's what the files would show. And of course, it seems to stand to reason that if there's nothing incriminating in the files, he has every incentive to release them. And none of his allies can explain why he won't in a way that makes any sense to me.
Yeah, there is this bizarre through line, though, from Pizzagate to QAnon to, you know, there are consistent travelers in that space. And you know, you mentioned that it's clear that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were friends at one point. He was also very good friends with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I remember when Congress was trying to go through the many ballots to elect a speaker, she was texting with him. And now she has joined the Epstein survivors in defying President Trump. She says this has ripped MAGA apart. I mean, what does her split with Trump do for that movement?
I wrote an article about Greene's very interesting revolt a couple of weeks ago. In many ways, she's retained some of her wildest ideological tendencies, the kind of conspiratorial accounts and the alliances with anti-Semitic elements on the right. But she's added this element of economic populism, and the foundation of which is that the economy right now is bad. She's speaking on behalf of people who are economically suffering. And that puts her directly at odds with Donald Trump, who insists the economy is great and that we're living in a golden age. And her implicating the Trump economy is really positioning herself as a kind of new kind of populist of this MAGA movement, one that doesn't treat Trump as the man who solved all their problems, but treats these problems as ongoing.
No, it's a fascinating development in sort of that political alliance. But, you know, here we are, the political circumstances are changing under the president's feet, which is an interesting thing to watch from here in Canada, as like we're in this trade war with your country that Congress could end. They choose not to, but here we have this moment.
Right.
He signed the bill aimed at releasing the files. I mean, what do you think actually gets released here? Because they're drumming up these other investigations, and those can become shields to keep certain things secret. What do you think the public actually gets to see out of this at the end of the day?
I mean, I think there's no chance that the Trump administration is going to release files that make Donald Trump look bad. If those files exist, they won't be released. Donald Trump doesn't pay attention to instructions from Congress. He doesn't follow laws that have even very clear requirements that he act in certain ways, or that he not act in certain ways. When it comes to any law that pertains to Donald Trump, the question you have to ask yourself is, what is the enforcement mechanism? Previous presidents have all sort of reflexively followed laws, but with Donald Trump, if there's no enforcement mechanism that can compel him to act in a way he doesn't want to, he will not act that way. That's almost a rule with him. So there's no enforcement mechanism in this resolution of Congress calling him to release the Epstein file. Nothing is going to happen if he doesn't release the files. And so I think you can just deduce that he won't.
Jonathan Chait, American politics staff writer with The Atlantic. We appreciate the time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.